I was halfway convinced the scanner was broken when it started humming like it had opinions. Not the polite hum of a machine doing its job, but the long, satisfied vibration of something that had just found what it had been looking for all its life. I stood there in the Interstellar Transit Clinic, boots still dusty from the docking ramp, stomach empty, head pounding, and patience already expired. I had come in for a routine clearance scan. Radiation exposure. Parasites. Maybe a space rash. Normal traveler stuff. I did not expect the machine to lean into me emotionally. Lights along the scanner's frame shifted from blue to an unsettling shade of gold. A chime rang out, bright and celebratory, like I'd just won a raffle I didn't remember entering. Nearby aliens turned their heads. A tall insectoid paused mid-click. A gelatinous being stopped wobbling. Someone actually gasped. "That's new," I muttered, squinting at the display. "I didn't even upgrade my ticket." The technician behind the console froze. Her eye stalks stiffened. She tapped the screen once, twice, then very carefully stepped back, as if the machine might bite. Without saying a word, she pressed a button I was fairly certain was not part of the normal workflow. Somewhere deeper in the facility, an alarm chimed, not loud, not urgent, just pleased. Footsteps approached. Slow. Confident. The kind of walk that suggested authority, and absolutely no sense of humor. She emerged through a privacy curtain that hadn't been there a second ago. Taller than me, wrapped in layered robes that looked ceremonial and medical at the same time, her skin a calm, reassuring shade of lavender. Her eyes locked onto mine immediately. Did not blink. Did not soften. Just assessed, the way a professional chef might look at an ingredient that had reached perfection. "Human," she said, voice warm and certain. "You emanate ripeness." The room went silent. I waited for the punchline. It did not arrive. "I'm sorry," I said, because that's what humans say when someone says something so strange it temporarily unplugs the brain. "I what?" "Ripeness," she repeated, nodding once. "Optimal density. Resonant vitality. A most generous saturation." Her gaze never left me. Not my face, not exactly. More like, all of me. As a concept. Around us, whispers spread like a fast-moving rash. I caught fragments of translated murmurs. "Confirmed? So strong? In public?" One being made a sound suspiciously like a low whistle. "I haven't slept in 20 hours, I said. "I've had nothing but caffeine paste and recycled air. If I'm emanating anything, it's probably poor life choices." She tilted her head, studying me with renewed interest. "Yes. Exactly." That did not help. She raised a slender hand and the scanner powered down, its golden glow fading with what I could only describe as disappointment. The midwife, because that's what the badge translated to, and I refused to unpack that yet, gestured for me to step away from the platform. "Please," she said kindly, "do not be alarmed. This is a fortunate diagnosis. Pretty sure most diagnoses start with 'we need to talk,' not whatever this is," I replied, but my feet moved anyway. Humans are great at that. Complaining while complying. Up close, her presence was overwhelming in a way that had nothing to do with threat. She smelled faintly floral, like a clean room that had been blessed by a garden. Her smile was professional, practiced, and deeply unsettling. "You are far from home," she said. "Travel fatigue. Emotional compression. Mild irritation." Her eyes brightened. "All indicators align." "For what?" "For eligibility." That word landed heavier than the others. I glanced around, suddenly aware that the small crowd had grown. Too many eyes. Too much interest. The kind you feel when you're the only person in a room who doesn't know the joke. "Look," I said, lowering my voice. "If this is about some kind of contamination—" "Oh no," she interrupted smoothly. "Quite the opposite." She produced a handheld scanner and swept it over me with reverence. The device chimed happily, projecting symbols I absolutely did not recognize but instinctively distrusted. "So ripe," she murmured, more to herself than to me. Exceptional resilience markers. Broad adaptability. And that ineffable human. She paused, searching for the word. Zest. I really wish you wouldn't say it like that. She finally laughed, a gentle sound. You humans are always so modest, even at your peak. My peak of what? She looked genuinely surprised by the question. Why, contribution, of course. I took a step back. She matched it effortlessly, still smiling. Before you panic, she said, anticipating me far too well, understand that no assumptions are being made. Consent is foundational. Celebration is customary. Celebration of what? Your arrival, she said. And your condition. I opened my mouth to argue, but she raised a finger. The crowd leaned in. Let us not discuss sensitive classifications in a public transit clinic, she said gently. You must be exhausted. Hungry. In need of privacy. I was all of those things, and I hated that she was right. Come, she continued. We will relocate you to suitable accommodations. Luxurious, of course. While we explain your options. Options usually come before relocation, I said. She smiled wider. In this case, the relocation is one of them. Before I could protest further, the technician returned with a small hovering platform and a look that said she would not be meeting my eyes ever again. The midwife gestured me forward with unmistakable authority. As I stepped onto the platform, carried gently away under the fascinated stares of half a dozen species, one thought finally crystallized through the fog of confusion. Whatever ripeness meant out here, it was clearly worth far more than my ticket. The accommodations were the first clue that I was in trouble. Not the bad kind of trouble. The expensive kind. The hovering platform glided through corridors that grew progressively quieter, cleaner, and more subtly intimidating. The walls shifted color as we passed, responding to the midwife's presence like obedient pets. The air smelled better here, richer, warmer, with a hint of something indulgent I couldn't identify but immediately trusted. My exhaustion softened against my will. This is unnecessary, I said, which was objectively false the moment the doors opened. The suite was enormous. Not nice hotel, enormous. Not even corrupt politician, enormous. This was the kind of space designed to make you forget you had ever lived differently. Soft lighting flowed from the walls themselves. Furniture adjusted its shape as I looked at it, clearly trying to guess my preferences. A panoramic window revealed a floating cityscape, all gentle curves and slow-moving traffic lanes, glowing like it had been designed by someone who hated stress on a personal level. Food appeared. Not ordered. Appeared. Platters settled onto a table that hadn't existed a second earlier. Steam rose. Aromas hit me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Protein-rich, carbohydrate-dense, comfort-flavored miracles. Something that smelled suspiciously like fresh bread and forgiveness. You have not eaten properly in some time, the midwife said, watching me with polite satisfaction. Please. Nourishment enhances clarity. I stared at the spread. This feels like a bribe. She clasped her hands. An incentive. That's worse. She ignored that. These quarters are reserved for high-value participants. Soundproofed. Shielded. Entirely private. The word participants echoed unpleasantly. I said anyway. My body betrayed me instantly. Hunger overruled suspicion with embarrassing speed. The first bite nearly made me emotional. I made a sound. I refused to apologize for it. As I ate, the midwife activated a holographic display. Symbols resolved into translated text, cheerful colors, rounded fonts. Everything about it screamed user-friendly. That alone set my teeth on edge. You are currently within a Class 3 fertility tourism hub, she explained. Discretion is essential. As is comfort. Tourism, I repeated slowly. That word is doing a lot of work. She nodded proudly. The industry supports dozens of systems. Entire economies depend on it. I swallowed. And where do I fit into this economy? She turned to face me fully, eyes bright with professional enthusiasm. Humans are exceedingly rare contributors. I paused mid-chew. Not numerically, she added quickly. Oh no. Your population is substantial. But your genetic profile, your adaptability, your resilience under stress, your emotional variability, creates what we call enhancement. That's not ominous at all, I said. In culinary terms, she continued unfazed, you are a flavor enhancer. A small amount dramatically improves outcomes. I put my utensil down. You're talking about people. Of course, she said warmly. That is what makes it ethical. That sentence made something cold slide down my spine. She gestured and the display shifted. Charts appeared. Success rates. Happy-looking alien silhouettes with upward arrows. Testimonials translated into unsettling enthusiasm. Cross-species developmental outcomes increased by an average of 47%, she said. Longevity, immunity, creativity, even temperament stability. All improved. By adding humans. By partnering with humans, she corrected gently. Consent-based, compensated, luxurious. I laughed once. It slipped out before I could stop it. You make it sound like a resort activity. She smiled. Many participants describe it as such. I leaned back, scanning the room again. Everything about this place was designed to say you are safe, you are valued, you are wanted. And that was the problem. Let me guess, I said. You saw the scan, decided I was ripe, and now you're offering me a deal. Yes. Where I give you something. Yes. And you give me this? She inclined her head. And more. The display flickered again. Numbers appeared. Credits. An amount so large my translator hesitated, then politely rounded up. I stared. That can't be right. It is a preliminary estimate, she said. Your profile suggests high compatibility across multiple markets. Markets, I repeated. She waved a hand, dismissive. A technical term. I rubbed my face. You realize humans are very sensitive about being treated like commodities. She looked genuinely curious. Yet you trade labor, creativity, even identity markers freely among yourselves. That's different. Why? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Took another bite of food. I absolutely should not have trusted this much. Around us, subtle movement caught my eye. Through the window, I noticed small hovering craft lingering longer than necessary. Sensors, maybe? Or just interest. You're being watched, I said. She followed my gaze. Admired. That's worse. She clasped her hands again. There is no pressure. You may decline at any time. Many do. And what happens then? You will depart, she said simply. With a generous inconvenience stipend. And a non-disclosure agreement. Of course there was. I snorted. So I either leave quietly, or stay and become, whatever this is. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You stay and become valued. The word hung there, heavy and tempting. I hated that part of me noticed how nice it felt. Before you consider, she added, brightening again. There is documentation. The air in front of me shimmered, and suddenly the table was buried under neatly stacked holographic pages. Titles scrolled cheerfully. Participation agreement. Cultural respect addendum. Minor ceremonial obligations. Branding and likeness usage. So many, I murmured. She beamed. Transparency is a cornerstone of trust. I picked up the first page. My smile faded as I started to read. The font was friendly. The clauses were not. I stared at the first page, squinting as if sheer willpower could make the words rearrange into something less terrifying. Friendly font, cheerful pastel colors, little icons dancing at the corners of paragraphs. Somewhere, a tiny animated flower winked at me, and I briefly considered screaming. The first clause read, Participant consents to temporary reallocation of personal genetic material for interspecies enhancement, including but not limited to enzymatic flavor optimization, adaptive resilience augmentation, and ceremonial presentation. I coughed. The midwife hovered beside me, smiling as if she just offered me a cup of tea instead of a legally binding lifetime of intergalactic weirdness. Standard language, she said brightly. All participants find it reassuring. Reassuring was not the word I would have used. Panicking or wanting to run screaming into space felt more accurate. Still, humans have a knack for adapting under pressure, so I picked up the next page. Clause 2. Participant acknowledges awareness of potential ritualistic observances, which may include music, aromatic stimulation, mild gravitational adjustments, and public commendation of genetic vitality. Mild, she said. Mild. Somewhere a nervous alien made a sound that might have been laughter, or panic. Honestly, it could have been both. Do I get a say in the music? I asked. Because I have very specific tastes. Very, very specific. Customization is encouraged, she replied. Within reason. I flipped the page. More cheerful icons. More clauses. One particularly happy-looking star announced that participants agreed to branding and likeness licensing for marketing purposes across 27 planetary systems. I choked on a mouthful of unasked-for enthusiasm. Wait. My face, my presence, my essence? You want to sell that? Only the aspects that increase market efficiency, she said earnestly. Your unique human energy signature is particularly valuable. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Energy signature, right. You've officially made me a walking ingredient. Enhancer, she corrected. But yes. In a sense. I was not sure whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I read on. Clause after clause. Mandatory check-ins, ceremonial acknowledgement of genetic input, potential contributions to interspecies cultural festivals. The icons winked. One, a little dancing blob, somehow seemed pleased. I had never felt more judged by a cartoon. Am I allowed to negotiate? I asked cautiously. Negotiation is uncommon, she admitted. Humans are generally compliant. She tilted her head, clearly expecting me to collapse into polite acceptance like everyone else. Humans are not generally compliant? That sounded like a challenge. I smiled faintly, the kind of grin that comes when you realize your species has been underestimated for millennia. Interesting. And if I say no to some clauses? Then alternative arrangements may be proposed, she said carefully. But efficiency would be affected. I held up the contract. You do realize humans are very good at making alternative arrangements. Her eyes flickered. A micro-expression I noted as amusement, or perhaps mild panic. Either way, it was delightful. I began scanning the clauses more aggressively, underlining, muttering to myself. Participant agrees to aroma-based supervision of dormitory accommodations during rest cycles. Dormitory? Rest cycles? What exactly did they mean by aroma-based supervision? Another clause mentioned consent to occasional observation by highly trained advisors. Observation. Observers. Advisors. I could almost see them taking notes on my posture and my sarcastic commentary. This was absurd. Humans are very resourceful, I said aloud, letting the words hang like a challenge. You may find that consent is negotiable. For example, I would like royalty on the use of my energy signature. The midwife blinked, then tilted her head. Royalties? Humans can request that? Absolutely, I said. I leaned back, folding my arms, feeling a surge of something that resembled empowerment. And also, I require dietary control over any ceremonies I participate in. No pastes resembling breakfast unless labeled clearly. And I will need access to my preferred aromatics. Lavender only, and only in measured quantities. She scribbled notes with a glowing stylus, nodding with almost mechanical obedience. Your requests will be reviewed by the council. Most likely approved. Most likely, I echoed. I like the sound of that uncertainty. Build suspense. I paused, Also, I want a clause excluding unsolicited ritualistic music. I am very protective of my auditory environment. A corner of her mouth twitched. Delight? Horror? Perhaps both. Noted, she said, still cheerful. Additional clauses? I leaned forward. Yes. No branding without explicit approval. And this is crucial, no unauthorized scent profiling. I value my olfactory privacy. She jotted everything down. This is highly unorthodox, she said. Humans are typically more acquiescent. I grinned. That is why you scanned me, isn't it? Perfectly ripe, but also perfectly human. Capable of thinking for myself. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Not physically, but in terms of atmosphere. The midwife paused, consulting some internal display only she could see. The winking icons on the contract now seemed a little less confident. The dancing blob frowned ever so slightly. Humans, I continued, warming to my argument, have a long history of turning seemingly minor negotiation leverage into advantageous outcomes. You may find that I am more valuable alive and thriving under mutually agreed terms than if I just accept everything blindly. She blinked at me, then smiled carefully. It seems you have studied your own species. Extensively, I said. And I recommend you do the same before you finalize this paperwork. The midwife made a small noise, a cross between a sigh and a chuckle, and the holographic display shimmered. Somewhere behind her, a low hum indicated that higher authorities might be involved. I ignored it, because humans are good at ignoring irrelevant threats when they smell potential leverage. I took a deep breath. One more thing. I need clarification on all ceremonial duties, including, but not limited to, participation in cultural festivals, public commendation of genetic vitality, aroma-based supervision, and any potential interplanetary media appearances. I demand transparency. Her head tilted again, this time with genuine curiosity. You are formidable. I smirked. That's just breakfast. I leaned back, hands behind my head, already imagining the aliens trying to reconcile cheerful contracts with a human who refused to be politely consumed by bureaucracy. By the time I finished revising the clauses, the midwife had visibly recalibrated. Her composure remained impeccable, but there was a subtle shift in her stance, a tiny twitch in the lavender of her robes that screamed, I did not expect this. The cheerful icons on the holographic contract blinked uncertainly, their animated winks slowing to cautious glances. Somewhere in the background, a monitoring drone hesitated mid-hover, as if reconsidering its job description. I believe we have reached a mutually acceptable framework, I said, folding my hands over the last page. All rights clarified, obligations transparent, royalties and privileges explicitly enumerated. Everyone wins. I tried not to grin too widely, though it was difficult to suppress. Humans have a natural talent for showing up and subtly rewriting the rules of engagement without ever firing a shot. The midwife tilted her head. You have considerable leverage, she admitted. Her tones suggested admiration mixed with the faintest tinge of panic. We did not anticipate a human exercising negotiation to such effect. I shrugged modestly. You underestimated us. Happens a lot. She stepped aside and gestured toward the panoramic window. I could see multiple small vessels now moving with unusual caution. Somewhere beyond the city, officials or observers, who I assumed were higher-ups in this fertility tourism bureaucracy, were pausing, likely calculating whether they could still outmaneuver a single human. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. Your requests are unprecedented, she continued. Custom royalties, strict dietary adherence, olfactory privacy, selective participation in ceremonial activities. These are not typical. I raised an eyebrow. Then we're all learning something today. Including you? The midwife laughed, a delicate sound that made the whole room feel lighter. She didn't try to mask it. That was the moment I realized humans might be rare in terms of biology here, but our arrogance, our audacity, and our sheer unwillingness to be treated like ingredients, that was universal. That was lethal in negotiations. Do you understand what this implies? She asked. That you, a single human, are effectively setting new standards for interspecies cooperation across multiple planetary systems? I leaned back, resting against a chair that had adjusted its shape to provide optimal lumbar support. Yeah. Pretty much. I'd like a medal for that, but I'll settle for decent accommodations and not being misrepresented in holoads. She smiled, tapping a few keys on a floating console. We will comply. But you realize this also sets a precedent for future human participants. I shrugged again. Let them try. Humans are surprisingly resilient. And negotiable when they need to be. Her eyes brightened. Indeed. And it is refreshing to see a participant assert control in such a manner. It may inspire confidence. I smirked. Or terror. Depends on the day. Possibly both, she said, and there was genuine amusement in her tone now. Your species truly is remarkable. We may have underestimated you. That, I realized, was the key. The humans weren't just rare because of biology or adaptability. We were rare because we refused to be predictable, refused to accept exploitation politely, and refused to surrender our autonomy even when everyone insisted it was easier to comply. That was the edge we carried through every system, every bureaucracy, every galaxy that thought it could bend us to its will. The contract, now glowing faintly with our mutually agreed modifications, hovered between us. It was still enormous, still incomprehensibly dense, still covered in alien bureaucratic flourishes. But it was mine too. I had left my mark. Not just in signatures and clauses, but in principle. Humans don't ask for much. We just ask that our terms be respected. Sometimes, that alone is revolutionary. Are you satisfied? She asked finally. I considered the room, the luxurious accommodations, the floating city beyond the window, and the sheer absurdity of being treated as both commodity and VIP at the same time. I am, I said. Satisfied, surprised, and marginally concerned for your species' ability to handle future humans. She laughed again. Noted. I will ensure the council is informed. As I stood, the floating furniture adjusted one last time, offering a subtle bow. The midwife gestured toward the exit corridor, her expression calm but infused with something I interpreted as respect. The attention I had been given, luxury, oversight, documentation, was now tempered by acknowledgement that humans, while biologically interesting, were far more formidable in spirit than anyone had calculated. I stepped onto the platform that would return me to the public transit area, one hand brushing absent-mindedly over the holographic contract. Somewhere behind me, small drones and hovering assistants adjusted their positions. They weren't afraid, exactly. They were cautious. They had learned, in the briefest moments, that humans can rewrite the rules by simply refusing to accept the ones laid before them. As the platform rose, I looked back at the midwife. Her eyes were calm now, her stance professional, but I caught a faint, fleeting smile, the kind that acknowledges a rare victory without diminishing the battle. She had met a human at our peak and recognized that the fight wasn't about power, control, or contracts. It was about presence, wit, and the refusal to be treated like a predictable ingredient in someone else's scheme. I exhaled. Humans were dangerous, even to civilizations that thought they were buying or enhancing us. We were resilient, adaptable, and above all, negotiable, but only on our terms. The midwife had learned it. The drones had learned it. The council would learn it. And I, apparently, had learned that being ripe, in the eyes of another species, was both terrifying and empowering in equal measure. As the corridor opened to the station beyond, I stepped off the platform with the calm confidence of someone who had just won an interstellar duel without lifting a weapon. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of this high-tech bureaucracy, whispers began. The humans, they negotiate differently. That, I realized, would be enough to keep them awake for years. And for once, I didn't mind.